Hey guys, tonight we are diving deep into the mud, muck, and madness of medieval survival hacks they definitely didn't teach you in school. Imagine trudging through slimy streets where waste seeps between your toes, the air thick with smoke and something suspiciously pungent. You're cold, you're hungry, and oh, you probably won't survive this. But hey, let's see how far you can make it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You squish forward through a medieval village, where the streets aren't so much paved as they are slathered. It's a messy soup of mud, animal droppings, and bits of discarded who knows what. You try to avoid stepping in anything particularly nasty, but the truth is, you're walking barefoot, because in this era, shoes are a luxury, and tough soles are your best defense. Your feet develop thick calluses over time, turning into nature's version of medieval sneakers. Sounds gross, but here's the kicker: those filthy, hardened feet actually protect you from cuts that could fester and kill you. Historians still argue whether villagers deliberately kept their feet dirty to shield against infection or whether hygiene just wasn't their thing. Either way, you're surviving. You shuffle past people who practically live in their shoes, if they're lucky enough to have them. Medieval shoes, by the way, were more like floppy leather bags tied to your feet with strings. No cushioned insoles, no arch support. Just you, the ground, and maybe a questionable puddle or two. Your feet ache, but you push on, remembering that one medieval hack: walking on the balls of your feet instead of stomping with your heels. Turns out, this soft-footed stride saves your joints and helps you move quietly, essential when you're dodging roaming guards or snappy street dogs. Some researchers today argue we've forgotten how to walk properly because of modern shoes. Try explaining that to your 2025 gym instructor. The streets here twist like a labyrinth, and you feel the uneven cobbles shift beneath you. You spot villagers shuffling around with wooden clogs, not because they're stylish, but because clogs lift you out of the sludge. The French called them sabots, and when angry workers threw them into machinery centuries later, they sparked the term sabotage. Fun, right? But you're just trying not to twist an ankle. You pass a tanner's shop, where animal hides soak in vats of something that smells suspiciously like week-old pee. That's because it is pee. Urine contains ammonia, which softens leather. The scent lingers in the air and, honestly, on the finished shoes. You probably shouldn't sniff too deeply. Your stomach growls, but hold that thought, we'll deal with food later. Right now, your focus is on your poor, battered feet. You're tempted to sit down, maybe rest near the town well, but careful, the edge is slick, and medieval wells are death traps for clumsy folks. More than a few unlucky souls slipped in while fetching water, vanishing with barely a splash. You notice that some folks smear animal fat or wax on their feet as a kind of medieval moisturizer, to prevent cracking in cold weather. The fat also works as a crude barrier against parasites. Smart, but the downside? You smell like a walking meat pie. Dogs follow you aggressively. You duck into a side alley, brushing past laundry lines where linens flap like surrender flags. A woman scrapes mud from her doorway with a wooden board. It's called a threshold, and yes, that's where the word comes from. She tosses the muck into the street, and you nearly step right into it. Classic. The alleyway opens into a cramped courtyard where kids play with hoops and sticks. You notice their feet, dirty, scratched, but tough. One boy's toenail is half gone, and he doesn't even flinch. You realize that in this world, a bit of pain is just background noise. Survival means pushing through it. You remember one old trick, soaking sore feet in cold water with crushed willow bark. Medieval people might not have known the science, but willow contains salicin, a natural painkiller, the ancestor of aspirin. Smart move. Whether they figured this out through trial and error or just sheer desperation, historians still argue about that. But not everyone had time for foot baths. Travelers on long pilgrimages, think hundreds of miles, often carried a small pouch of dry moss or soft cloth to pad their sandals, absorbing sweat and cushioning each step. It's the medieval version of Dr. Scholl's. Not perfect, but when your other option is open blisters scraping against raw leather, you take what you can get. You start to wonder, could you survive an entire day barefoot in this world? Remember, stepping on a sharp rock isn't just painful, it could mean infection, blood poisoning, even death. They didn't have antibiotics. A cut could take you out faster than a sword fight. But here's a quirky bit, some travelers actually carried foot ointments made from a mix of goose fat and crushed herbs, including marigold and plantain leaves. Modern studies suggest plantain leaves have antimicrobial properties. Accident or genius? That's still up for debate. You pause near a cobbler's workshop, watching as he stitches together thin leather uppers with waxed thread. Shoes were often bespoke, hand-measured for each foot, which is lovely unless you're poor. For you, it's probably hand-me-downs or scavenged scraps. Maybe even sandals woven from bark strips. Not comfy, but better than splinters. A man limps past, his foot wrapped in cloth and tied with twine. You overhear him muttering about stepping on a rusty nail. That's not just an inconvenience here, it's a possible death sentence. Tetanus, also called lockjaw, was poorly understood, though people sometimes packed wounds with cobwebs. Turns out spider silk contains mild antiseptic properties and helps clot blood. It's one of those bizarre but potentially life-saving hacks people stumbled into. As you continue through the village, you pass a church where pilgrims sit barefoot on the cold stone steps. Some walk without shoes on purpose as a sign of humility and penance. Others? They simply can't afford them. Shoes, in some areas, were taxed luxuries, reserved for the better off. Going barefoot wasn't a style choice, it was survival. The sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the street. Your feet are sore, cold, and coated in layers of mud and grime, but oddly, you've made it this far without a serious injury. Maybe you're tougher than you thought. Maybe you've got just enough grit to survive this brutal world. Or maybe, you just haven't stepped on the wrong thing yet. Your feet might be tough, but without water, even the hardiest medieval survivor doesn't last long. And here's where things get complicated. You glance around the village, spotting wells, streams, and barrels collecting rain, but every source carries a gamble. How do you drink without dying? Welcome to medieval hydration, the part they really don't glamorize. The first rule? Don't trust the water. It looks clean enough, a little stream winding its way past the village, but looks deceive. Upstream, livestock graze, and further up, let's just say sanitation isn't high on anyone's list. The same stream that quenches your thirst also carries every unpleasant thing you can imagine. So what did people do? They got creative, or desperate. You watch as a woman carefully filters water through moss packed into a clay jug. It's not perfect, but it catches debris, bugs, and at least some impurities. Historians still argue whether moss filtering actually made a big difference or if it was more about peace of mind. Either way, it beats scooping water straight from the ditch. But filtering only goes so far. That's why, surprisingly, beer and ale were safer than water, even for kids. You sidle up to a market stall where barrels of ale sit ready for sale. It's weak, barely alcoholic, but brewed long enough to kill off harmful bacteria. Monks, who often doubled as the local brewing experts, produced these small beers in monasteries, keeping entire villages hydrated, one foamy cup at a time. You take a sip of weak ale, wincing at the sour, grainy aftertaste. Definitely not your modern IPA. But considering your other option is cholera or dysentery, suddenly, this murky brew tastes life-saving. Some folks took to boiling their water over fires, but let's be real, firewood is precious, and boiling takes time. You spot travelers with leather water skins slung across their shoulders, but even those need refilling from somewhere. And finding a safe stream? That's survival gold. A merchant passing through brags about a clever trick from the East, using silk or linen to strain water through fine cloth. It removes larger particles, but the real breakthrough, at least according to rumor, is charcoal filtering, known in some ancient cultures. Whether medieval peasants widely used it? Historians still debate that, but traders and wealthier travelers may have caught on to the method. You edge toward the village well, wary of its history. Wells were vital but also risky. If someone carelessly dropped waste nearby, or worse, dumped something deliberately, it could poison the entire water supply. There's even a tale circulating about towns blaming outsiders or accused witches for cursing wells when villagers fell sick. Convenient scapegoat, grim reality. A fringe tidbit you overheard from a grizzled old farmer? Some claimed adding crushed charcoal or even burnt bread to water helped purify it. The science checks out more than they probably realized. Charcoal does absorb some toxins. Whether it tasted better? Highly doubtful. You wander beyond the village limits, where the forest looms, cool and quiet. Here, fresh water can be a blessing, or a deadly gamble. You kneel beside a trickling stream, eyeing its clarity, the green edges lined with moss and wildflowers. It looks safe. But the memory of livestock and other, less savory surprises upstream makes you hesitate. You recall a wilderness trick: find water where reeds and frogs thrive. If the wildlife's healthy, chances are, so is the water. But that's no guarantee. Desperation makes you bold, though, and you spot something useful nearby: birch bark containers. Birch sap isn't just for syrup, it offers a light, watery drink in spring. Sweet, faintly woody, and, most importantly, safe. Birch tapping was known to some medieval folks, especially in the colder north. You carefully notch a small slit in the bark, collecting clear sap in a crude cup. It's not much, but in a survival pinch, every drop counts. Further into the woods, you spot a trick your medieval ancestors swore by: digging shallow, seep holes, near streams or ponds. As groundwater seeps through the soil into your makeshift pit, it filters out some impurities. Again, not foolproof, but better than nothing. Modern survivalists still teach this. Some hacks really do stand the test of time. Back in the village, you pass by barrels catching rainwater from sloped roofs. It's the cleanest option if the container's covered. Open barrels? A breeding ground for mosquitoes, slime, and floating surprises. You decide to skip that buffet. Near the blacksmiths, a group of villagers huddle around steaming cauldrons, not for cooking, but brewing herbs into weak teas. Some herbs double as mild disinfectants, masking foul water flavors and calming nervous stomachs. Mint, chamomile, even yarrow, useful and, in small doses, safe. A traveling healer boasts of silver coins dropped into water jugs, a fringe trick believed to slow spoilage. Turns out, silver does have antimicrobial properties. Whether peasants actually practiced this? That's still argued among historians, but the wealthy likely dabbled. Sadly, your coin pouch is non-existent. You pause by a tavern where the local specialty is posset, hot milk curdled with ale or wine. It sounds awful, but it's filling, hydrating, and faintly alcoholic. Everything, it seems, doubles as survival and stomach lining in this world. The villagers share whispered tales of sickness spreading when wells run dry and people grow careless. You learn quickly, trust nothing blindly. That clear-looking stream? Maybe fine. Or maybe it carries the memory of a dead animal floating upstream. That bucket of water at the inn? Ask how long it's been sitting. And never, ever drink straight from puddles, no matter how thirsty. As you walk toward the village outskirts, your survival instincts sharpen. You scan for moss-filtered jugs, listen for the gentle drip of clean rainwater, and remind yourself of one harsh truth: hydration is a constant hustle. Forget your bottled water convenience. Here, every sip could decide whether you live to trudge another muddy mile. And just as you're feeling confident, a grinning merchant passes by, casually mentioning that some travelers swear by drinking from certain stagnant pools, claiming the green scum wards off sickness. You raise an eyebrow. Even medieval folk knew that sounded dodgy, but desperation breeds risk. Some of those slime drinkers live to tell the tale. Others, well, history's silent on their outcome. Either way, your survival odds just improved, one careful sip at a time. Your throat's not parched anymore, your belly's sloshing with weak ale and suspicious birch sap, but now comes the real challenge: fire. Without it, you're cold, hungry, and basically advertising yourself as prey for sickness, animals, or whatever's lurking in the woods after sundown. The medieval world didn't hand out matches, and striking up a cozy flame? It's way trickier than Hollywood makes it look. You crouch near a clearing just outside the village, hands fumbling with flint and steel. It's the medieval equivalent of a pocket lighter, except it's frustrating, unpredictable, and one spark in 10 actually catches. You strike the steel, watching tiny orange sparks leap onto a wisp of dry fungus tucked into a bed of bark shavings. Tinder fungus, they call it, shaved from bracket fungi growing on birch trees. Some folks call it amadou, and in this world, it's a survivalist's best friend. Tinder fungus catches embers, smolders like a stubborn coal, and lets you blow life into a fire without panicking every time your flint fizzles. Historians still argue whether its widespread use stretched across all of Europe or just among the craftier forest dwellers. Either way, you're grateful for the trick. The spark takes, faint smoke curls upward, and you lean close, gently coaxing the ember to life. You remember watching villagers earlier, patiently prepping their fires with bundles of dry grass, brittle twigs, and even strips of linen scraped down to fine threads. Linen burns fast, wasteful, maybe, but if your survival's on the line, sacrificing old rags is worth it. Nearby, you spot an old man with a clever hack, char cloth. He takes scraps of cotton or linen, chars them in a sealed pot over the fire until they're blackened but not burned. The result? Super flammable tinder that catches even the weakest spark. It's like cheating at fire starting, medieval style. Of course, you need fuel. You scan the woods for dead branches. Live wood's a waste of time unless you're into smoky, sputtering frustration. The deadfall crackles in your grip, dry as tinder, but the bigger challenge? Keeping it dry. Medieval folks knew better than to leave their precious firewood exposed. They stacked it under lean-tos, in sheds, or, if traveling, carried bundles tucked inside cloaks, away from rain and snow. Speaking of cloaks, remember that wool cloak from earlier? Turns out, wool's not just warm, it's fire-resistant. You can sit close to the flames without becoming a human torch. Handy when you're cooking or just desperate for warmth. As the fire grows, licking at the twigs, you notice a peculiar practice from nearby villagers, using animal dung as fuel. It sounds foul, and honestly, it is. But dried cow or horse dung burns surprisingly well, especially in treeless areas where firewood's scarce. You wrinkle your nose, but respect the ingenuity. Survival doesn't care about dignity. Out in the open, smoke curls upward, carrying your scent far beyond the clearing. That's both good and bad. Good if you need help. Bad if you're hiding from, say, highwaymen or wild animals. You recall stories of forest dwellers covering fires with green leaves to produce thick, camouflaging smoke, or banking fires with ash to make them smolder low and slow, nearly invisible. Some fringe folk claim that adding certain herbs, sage, juniper, even mugwort, wards off evil spirits or sickness. Historians still argue whether it was superstition or if the smoke actually repelled insects. Either way, it beats getting eaten alive by mosquitoes while you roast your supper. You glance at your pitiful supply of firewood, realizing just how much effort goes into keeping a fire alive. It's not just striking sparks and basking in warmth, it's constant gathering, tending, and paranoia about the elements snuffing it out. Rain? Disaster. Wind? Your worst enemy. Snow? Hope you've mastered patience. In some parts of medieval Europe, people carried firepots, clay or metal containers holding smoldering embers, tucked under cloaks or strapped to saddles. The embers stayed alive for hours, ready to rekindle a full fire with minimal fuss. You'd kill for one of those right now, but your empty hands say otherwise. Wandering further, you remember hearing of another trick, bow drills. It's the most exhausting, blister-inducing method imaginable. You loop a cord around a spindle, brace it with a block of wood, and saw back and forth until friction produces heat, and hopefully, an ember. It works, eventually. But unless you've got the skill and stamina of a medieval woodsman, frustration might get the better of you. In a nearby hamlet, you spotted evidence of another old hack: flammable resin scraped from pine trees. It's sticky, messy, and clings to your fingers like sap glue, but light a clump of that stuff, and it burns hot and bright, even in damp conditions. The locals call it pitch or fatwood. You make a mental note to collect some, if the forest offers it. Your little fire crackles, casting flickering shadows across the clearing. The warmth seeps into your bones, the smoke curling into the star-flecked sky. For now, you're safe. But in the medieval world, safe is always temporary. A group of travelers nearby chat about the eternal flame myth, stories of hidden fires that never go out, protected by monks or tucked inside temples. Some believe these were real, carefully tended fires passed down for generations, never allowed to die. Others dismiss it as romantic nonsense. Historians still argue the truth, but the idea lingers, a comforting fantasy in a brutal world. You toss another branch onto your fire, savoring the glow. It might not last, but tonight, you've got light, heat, and one less reason to freeze or starve. Medieval survival is about stacking tiny wins, and this fire? It's your first real one. Of course, you're not out of the woods yet, literally. But with a flame flickering beside you and a handful of old-world tricks in your pocket, maybe, just maybe, you'll make it to dawn. The fire crackles low behind you, casting just enough warmth to chase away the evening chill. But survival isn't just about staying warm, it's about staying fed. And in the medieval world, hunting for food isn't a weekend hobby with fancy camo gear. It's a gritty, relentless part of daily life, and honestly, you're probably going to mess it up at first. Your stomach rumbles as you scan the woods, eyes tracing faint animal tracks pressed into the soft earth. Rabbit prints. Maybe a hare. Fast, twitchy, and with survival instincts sharper than yours. You'd better learn the tricks they didn't exactly advertise in medieval town squares, because starving to death? Not a fun option. First lesson: traps over chasing. You're not sprinting after wild boars or deer with bare hands unless you fancy a trip to the afterlife. Medieval peasants and outlaws relied on cunning. You kneel near a faint game trail and spot the perfect setup, a simple snare. A loop of cord, maybe sinew, maybe braided plant fibers, tied to a bent sapling. Animal steps through, sapling snaps upward, and dinner sorted. At least, if you're lucky. Historians still argue whether common folk widely knew intricate trapping methods, or if those were guarded by professional hunters and poachers. But a basic snare? Almost everyone struggling to survive would have picked that up, even if they weren't supposed to. The forest holds more than just rabbits. You spy faint scratch marks on a tree, deer territory. But taking down a deer? That's risky. You'd need arrows, skill, and preferably permission. Poaching was illegal in many places. Lords and kings guarded their forests like paranoid dragons. Get caught with an unauthorized bough, and your dinner plans turn into prison plans, or worse. A fringe tidbit floats through your memory. Some folks swore by using sticky tree resin to trap birds or small mammals. Smear the resin on branches near bait, wait for an unlucky critter to get stuck, and, well, that's protein sorted. Cruel? Maybe. Effective? Absolutely. You edge toward a thicket and spot another forager's trick: deadfall traps. A flat rock or heavy log propped up with a stick, bait tucked underneath. Animal noses around, knocks the stick, and gravity handles the rest. It's simple, silent, and doesn't waste precious arrows or effort. Speaking of arrows, medieval bows aren't casually stashed under every bush. If you want one, you either carve it yourself, good luck with that, or barter with a craftsman. Longbows, short bows, crossbows, each with quirks, costs, and risks. Crossbows, especially, were the forbidden fruit of commoners in many regions, seen as too dangerous for peasants. But outlaws? They loved them. You glance down, spotting edible plants woven through the undergrowth. Even if you fail at hunting, the forest offers greens, if you know what you're looking for. Wild garlic, dandelion leaves, chickweed. They won't fill you up, but they might keep scurvy at bay. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had deep botanical knowledge or just guessed their way through foraging. Either way, mistakes were deadly. Misidentify a leaf, and your relaxing evening turns into a feverish nightmare. A trick you overheard from a woodsman earlier? Smell, taste, and nibble, tiny amounts first. If your lips tingle or your stomach flips, spit it out. Primitive, but better than poisoning yourself. Further into the woods, you spot mushrooms, brown caps clinging to damp logs. Tempting. But unless you've apprenticed under a medieval herbalist or you enjoy gambling with your life, maybe skip those. Fungi identification is a game with permanent consequences. Your stomach growls louder, so you remember another old trick: fishing. Not fancy rods and tackle, but lines with crude hooks, woven nets, or, if you're bold, fish weirs. These simple structures of woven branches funnel fish into narrow traps. You've seen them along streams, placed by patient villagers. It's low effort, high reward, and surprisingly clever. A fringe survival hack from coastal folk? Seaweed. Packed with minerals, easy to collect, and edible, if a bit slimy. Inland, you're out of luck, but near the coast, even hungry peasants scoured the shores for kelp or edible sea greens. Hunting's hard, but scavenging? That's unsettlingly common. You hear whispers of battlefield scavengers, desperate souls following armies, picking meat from abandoned supplies, fallen animals, and, well, sometimes the line between desperate and grotesque blurs. But hey, survival isn't pretty. You return to your snare, pulse quickening, success. A rabbit dangles, limp and quiet. You feel a pang of guilt, but hunger wins. Skinning it's a messy job, your hands slick with fur and warmth, but you've seen worse. Fire-roasted rabbit won't win culinary awards, but in this world, it's a feast. Back near your campfire, you recall how medieval folks wasted nothing. The fur becomes lining for gloves, the bones boil into broth, sinew doubles as cordage. You might be a lousy hunter, but even small hauls stretch further than they look. Suddenly, a villager passing by shares an odd tale. Some claim carrying a dead rabbit's foot brings luck. Historians still debate the origins of that superstition, but hey, considering the odds of survival, you'll take all the luck you can get. You gnaw on the roasted meat, savoring the smoky, gamey flavor. It's not gourmet, but it fills the gnawing void in your belly. Around you, the forest hums with unseen life, reminding you that even with a full stomach, this medieval world remains wild, unpredictable, and relentless. But now, at least for tonight, you've hunted, foraged, and eaten. that counts as a win. And in this world, wins are rare, and absolutely worth savoring. You lean back, belly full, for now, and stare up through the bare branches. The stars blink cold and distant above you, reminding you just how small, how fragile you are out here. Food, water, fire, they're all essential. But without shelter, you might as well be lying in your grave. Exposure, after all, kills quicker than hunger. The medieval world wasn't dotted with cozy cabins and sturdy inns for wanderers like you. If you wanted shelter, you built it, or begged for it. Tonight, you're building it. First rule of survival: location. You scan the forest floor for signs of danger, low ground where rain pools, widowmakers, those dead branches poised to fall, and, of course, signs of larger predators. This isn't just you versus the cold, it's you versus nature, sickness, and whatever hungry eyes might be watching from the shadows. A gentle rise near a cluster of birch trees catches your eye. Dry ground, natural windbreak, and best of all, no evidence of animal dens. You settle in, mind racing through the shelter hacks medieval folks passed down, the kind they didn't scribble into fancy manuscripts, but whispered between generations. The simplest? A lean-to. You wedge a sturdy branch against the trunk of a tree, layering smaller sticks at an angle, then pile leaves, bark, or pine boughs over the top. It's rough, it's drafty, but it turns a brutal night into a survivable one. Historians still argue whether such crude shelters were common knowledge among peasants or if only seasoned woodsmen mastered the craft. But when the wind howls, even a novice learns fast. Your fingers scrape bark and twigs together, constructing the skeletal frame. It's not pretty, but practicality beats aesthetics every time. You pile leaves, weaving them tight, and marvel at a quirky tidbit: dry leaves, when packed properly, insulate surprisingly well. Old forest dwellers called it nature's thatch. Further out, you spot a forgotten technique: debris huts. Think of it like a woodland cocoon. You pile sticks in a triangular frame, heap leaves and branches over the top, and crawl inside. It's cramped, claustrophobic, but traps body heat like a medieval sleeping bag. Uncomfortable? Absolutely. Life-saving? You bet. You consider building a fire inside your shelter, but caution whispers otherwise. Closed spaces and open flames? Bad mix. Smoke inhalation, burns, waking up roasted like a feast day pig, not ideal. Better to build your fire just outside, angled so the heat reflects inward. A trick as old as cold nights themselves. Some forest folks use reflector walls, piling logs or stones behind their fire to bounce heat toward their shelter. Simple physics, clever survival. You'll set one up once your lean-to's sorted. Suddenly, you remember a village woman's tale, the tree hollow hack. In forests with ancient oaks or elms, wide hollows sometimes offered refuge. Dry, hidden, natural shelter. But risk lurked there too: bears, wolves, or worse could already call it home. You approach with caution, but tonight, no lucky hollow greets you. Instead, you weave your shelter tighter, layering moss between gaps. Moss isn't just padding, it's insulation. And, in desperate times, a primitive sponge. Quirky, useful, and surprisingly versatile. A fringe technique floats through your memory: the snow trench. In deep winter, Digging into snow itself creates insulated shelters. It sounds ridiculous, burrowing into the very thing that threatens to freeze you, but snow traps heat better than raw exposure. Historians still debate how widespread this trick was, but northern folk, they knew their snow. You finish your lean-to, stepping back to admire your crude handiwork. It won't win medieval architecture awards, but tonight, it's home. Inside, it's cramped. Your wool cloak cushions the ground, a modest barrier between your body and the cold earth. You pile evergreen boughs along the walls, savoring their faint, sharp scent. Practical and a little comforting, a small reminder that even survival can have its pleasant moments. You tuck your gear, flint, cordage, scraps of food, within arm's reach. Medieval wisdom warns never to sleep far from your essentials. Lose them, and tomorrow could be your last sunrise. Outside, the fire flickers, throwing warm light across the darkened forest. You add the reflector wall, a rough stack of logs angled to bounce heat toward your shelter. It's not much, but the difference is immediate. Warmth kisses your cheeks, your breath curls in the cold air, and for the first time today, your body begins to relax. You recall hearing about the cave shelters in hilly regions, natural formations providing refuge. But caves? Tricky business. Sure, they offer protection from wind and rain, but they're also homes to bats, predators, or worse. Plus, the damp chill inside can sap your strength quicker than an open night sky. Medieval travelers knew to weigh the risks. Some even carried oil lamps to scout caves before committing to sleep. You, however, stick to your humble lean-to. As twilight deepens, you reflect on another odd hack, the bracken mattress. In some forests, folks gathered armfuls of bracken fern, layering it thick beneath their sleeping area. It cushioned the ground, warded off insects, and added insulation. You'd kill for some now, but the undergrowth here offers slim pickings. Still, you adapt, scavenging dry grass and leaves, padding your shelter as best you can. It's itchy, uneven, but beats the bare earth. Above you, the sky glows faintly with moonlight. The forest whispers, leaves rustling, distant animal calls. You wonder how many medieval wanderers huddled under shelters like this, hearts racing with the same primal fears. Bandits. Wolves. The cold. Even other humans, desperate and dangerous as any beast. A faint smile creeps across your lips at a strange thought. Despite your makeshift shelter, you've accidentally tapped into a timeless ritual. Generation after generation, survival boiled down to the same essentials: cover your head, warm your bones, guard your back. Historians still argue just how self-reliant medieval peasants truly were, or whether most clung to the edges of villages for dear life. But out here, it's just you, your wits, and whatever the land provides. Your shelter creaks softly as you shift inside, but it holds. The fire pops, casting dancing shadows across the trees. It's not luxury. It's not permanent. But it's enough. For tonight, you've carved out a sliver of safety in a brutal, beautiful world. And with shelter overhead and warmth close by, you close your eyes, letting the quiet hum of the forest lull you toward restless sleep. Dawn creeps across the forest like a lazy cat, pale light filtering through the skeletal branches. Your eyes crack open, your body stiff from the uneven bedding. The shelter held, the fires down to glowing embers, and your breath curls in the morning chill. You survived the night, but that's just the beginning. Out here, medieval survival isn't just about the woods. It's about people. Villages. Market towns. Wandering strangers. Because unless you plan to live feral in the forest forever, at some point, you're going to stumble into civilization. And let's be honest, you're probably going to stick out like a sore thumb. You shoulder your meager supplies and trudge along the faint track leading through the trees. After an hour, the forest thins, giving way to rough fields and thatched rooftops in the distance. A medieval village, small, smoky, and suspicious. First survival hack. Blending in. These folks aren't keen on newcomers. Travelers mean trouble, disease, theft, or just more mouths to feed. You brush leaves from your cloak, adjust your hood low, and remind yourself, look tired, not threatening. The village reeks of wood smoke, livestock, and humanity. A cluster of huts, fenced gardens, a sagging church steeple in the distance. Mud clings to everything. Kids chase chickens between puddles. A mangy dog eyes you warily. Historians still argue how often strangers were welcomed versus run off with pitchforks. But one thing's certain, medieval life was close-knit, insular. Outsiders? Rarely trusted. You pass a cart laden with firewood, the driver glancing your way. No words exchanged, just a wary nod. It's a delicate dance here. Too quiet. Suspicious. Too friendly. Suspicious. You aim for cautious neutrality. A fringe tidbit floats through your memory. Some outlaws disguise themselves as wandering pilgrims or beggars to slip through towns unnoticed. Religious garb bought you leniency, at least in theory. But get caught faking sainthood? You're in for a world of trouble. The village square is modest, a crooked well, a notice board with faded proclamations, and the unmistakable smell of fresh bread. Your stomach growls on cue. But money? You're fresh out. Medieval survival means bartering. Coins are scarce, especially for wanderers. You scan for odd jobs, mending fences, chopping wood, even mucking stables. It's undignified, but dignity won't fill your belly. An elderly woman offers a skeptical glance, pointing to a pile of firewood needing splitting. You nod, grateful for even this humble opportunity. The axe is dull, the wood knotty, but your muscles remember the rhythm. Thunk. Split. Stack. It's menial, but it buys you goodwill, and maybe a crust of bread. As you work, you overhear snippets of village life, talk of the Lord's reeve collecting taxes, rumors of bandits on the road, whispers of sickness in the next county. Fear, gossip, and hard work fuel these people. It's a fragile existence, balanced on the edge of survival. You finish your task, palms blistered, but the woman hands you a chunk of coarse bread and a bowl of thin broth. It's bland, watery, but nourishing. You eat gratefully, remembering another essential hack: keep your ears open. Medieval towns buzz with information, if you listen. Markets, taverns, even church sermons, they're where alliances form, dangers surface, and opportunities whisper your way. Historians still argue how much medieval commoners understood the wider world beyond their village. But rumors traveled, through merchants, soldiers, even wandering minstrels. You just had to pay attention. You make your way to the blacksmith's lean-to, curiosity piqued. Tools clatter, metal sings as hammer meets iron. Here, survival upgrades itself, knives, nails, maybe even weapons. But without coin, it's all out of reach, unless you know the lost nail trick. See, blacksmith's hated waste. Dropped nails or scraps often littered the ground. Sharp-eyed scavengers pocketed them, tradable, reparable, even weaponizable. You discreetly eye the dusty ground, but today? No such luck. Instead, you trade conversation. The smith, arms like tree trunks, grunts when you mention the road ahead. Bandits. Bad weather. Worsening crops. Same old story. But he offers advice: don't travel at dusk. Stay to the main roads, and if a man sells miracle cures from a wagon, keep walking. It's sound advice. Medieval roads are treacherous after dark, no street lamps, just shadows and highwaymen. But even by day, strangers hawking charms and elixirs prey on the desperate. Some remedies work, most. Snake oil with a medieval twist. A fringe survival hack from traveling peddlers? Garlic strings. Hung from doors, worn around necks, even tucked into bed straw. Supposedly wards off disease, spirits, and vampires. Real medical value? Debated. But you admit, the smell alone could clear a room. Evening falls. The village shutters its windows, livestock penned tight, smoke curling from chimneys. You weigh your options, risk sleeping rough outside town, or cozy up to the alehouse crowd. The tavern beckons, a squat, smoky building buzzing with low laughter and the clink of wooden mugs. Inside, it's cramped. Ale sloshes, dice clatter, and suspicious eyes track your every move. Medieval taverns are a coin toss, sometimes refuge, sometimes a den of thieves. You nurse a watered-down ale, listening. Road rumors. Market prices. One man boasts of poaching deer from the Lord's forest, foolish and illegal, but desperate times breed bold men. A hooded figure in the corner mutters to a companion about the old Roman road, still solid, just mind the brigands. That catches your attention. Roman roads, remnants of empire, still slice through the countryside. Straight, reliable, and often faster, if you survive the journey. Historians still debate how well maintained these roads remain centuries later. But for you? It's a gamble worth considering. As you sip your drink, a wiry minstrel strums a lute by the hearth, singing of distant cities and forgotten kings. His song blends fact and fantasy, but it plants a seed. Out there, beyond muddy villages and smoke-choked inns, the world sprawls wide and dangerous, and full of possibility. You finish your ale, tuck your gear close, and retreat to a quiet corner for sleep. The floor's hard, the blanket thin, but you've learned tonight, survival isn't just braving the woods, it's reading people, blending in, and navigating the fragile dance of medieval village life. And tomorrow? You'll have to dance that much better. Morning spills through the warped glass panes of the tavern, weak and silvery. You sit up, joints aching from the hard floor, the stale scent of ale and smoke clinging to your clothes. The chatter of villagers starting their day filters in, the bleating of goats, the clatter of hooves on muddy lanes, distant church bells calling the pious, or the guilty. Today's lesson in medieval survival? Travel. Because unless you plan to rot in this smoky alehouse or till muddy fields for the rest of your days, you need to know how to move safely, and smartly, through this dangerous, fragmented world. Roads in the Middle Ages weren't like highways today. They were rough, narrow, often little more than well-worn paths pounded into the earth by generations of boots, hooves, and wagon wheels. You shoulder your pack, nod to the bleary-eyed innkeeper, and step into the morning chill. Your destination? Anywhere that isn't here. But getting there without ending up robbed, lost, or worse. That's where the Real hacks come in. First rule: know your roads. Roman roads, as that minstrel whispered last night, still crisscross parts of the land. Straight as an arrow, built with layered stone and gravel, they've outlived empires. But they come with risks. Their visibility makes them prime hunting grounds for highwaymen. A fringe tidbit floats back. Some medieval travelers believed that certain Roman roads were haunted, ghostly processions of legionnaires marching endlessly through the mists. Historians still argue whether these tales arose from real sightings, or the side effects of sleep deprivation and bad ale. You stick to the byways for now, narrow lanes winding between hedgerows and stone walls. The going is slower, but you stay hidden from prying eyes. Your boots crunch on frost-tipped grass. Birds call overhead, fields stretch in patchwork greens and browns, and distant thatched roofs dot the horizon. Travel in the Middle Ages wasn't just about movement, it was a mental game of constant awareness. Bandits favored blind turns, dense forests, lonely stretches. You watch for broken branches, strange footprints, or disturbed undergrowth. The signs are subtle, but they can mean the difference between arriving safely, or vanishing without a trace. Another key hack? Travel in groups. Lone wanderers are easy targets. But tag along with traders, pilgrims, or even a ragtag merchant caravan, and suddenly, you're part of a moving wall of wary eyes and weapons. Up ahead, you spot just such a group: 2 ox-drawn carts laden with barrels, a cluster of rough-looking men and women walking beside them. They eye you as you approach, and your posture says it all: cautious, but not threatening. You exchange basic pleasantries. Their leader, a barrel-chested man with a crooked grin, offers a wary nod. Heading east? Could use an extra set of eyes. It's not friendship, it's practicality. More eyes, fewer surprises. Historians still debate how organized medieval travelers truly were. Some suggest ad hoc groups like this were common, others argue that only large, well-armed convoys dared the open roads. Either way, safety in numbers holds true. You fall and step beside the cart. The wheels creak, the oxen plod, and the other travelers trade quiet jokes, nervous glances at the tree line. They share road tales, bandit ambushes, corrupt toll keepers, phantom lights in the marshes. You catch another survival tidbit: river crossings. Bridges are rare, often guarded by tolls or controlled by lords eager to squeeze travelers for coin. Some crossings are fords, shallow spots where wagons and feet can wade across. But rains can swell rivers overnight, turning safe crossings into deadly traps. As you round a bend, the sound of rushing water greets you. The group halts at a ford, muddy and swollen from recent rains. The leader frowns. Risk it, or wait. You weigh the options. Cross now, risk getting swept downstream. Wait, risk bandits finding you exposed. It's the medieval traveler's dilemma, speed versus safety. In the end, they opt to wait. You help gather wood, scanning for shelter. Nearby, a small shrine to some forgotten saint watches over the ford, half-rotted, moss-grown. Locals believe such spots offer protection, but you've learned that saints, like lords, don't always answer when you call. A quirky detail catches your eye: the group's healer, a wiry woman with sharp eyes, strings small bells to the oxen's harnesses. Supposedly, the gentle jingling wards off evil spirits lurking in the woods. Real protection? Debatable. But the noise might at least spook curious animals. The river calms by afternoon, and the group pushes on. You trudge alongside, muscles stiff, but senses sharp. Survival here isn't just strength, it's observation. A cart will breaks outside a village boundary. The group grumbles, the leader curses, and you spot another essential hack: basic repair skills. In a world without auto shops or tow trucks, knowing how to fix a wheel, mend leather, or patch a pack means the difference between being stranded, or making it to the next town. You help patch the wheel with spare wood and rawhide. Crude, but functional. The group appreciates your competence. Trust, a rare currency, starts to trickle in. Evening falls, and you camp by the roadside, careful to choose high, dry ground with a clear view. The fire crackles, stew bubbles in a dented pot, and the group relaxes, but never fully. Historians still argue how prevalent road tolls, corrupt officials, and outright robbery were versus romantic exaggeration. But for you, the tension in every traveler's shoulders tells its own story. As you eat, you share knowledge: a forgotten shortcut through marshes, a tale of a hidden Roman milestone marking an ancient road fork. Information is traded like coin here, and your worth rises with every useful tidbit. Later, as you settle beneath your cloak, stars gleaming above, you marvel at how far, simple, travel stretches beyond walking. It's reading terrain, spotting danger, navigating social cues, fixing what breaks, sharing knowledge, and always, always watching your back. Tomorrow, the road stretches on, rutted, winding, unpredictable. But tonight, you've learned, medieval survival isn't about rushing ahead. It's about reading the world one careful step at a time. The morning sun crests the horizon, burning off the last wisps of mist as you rise from your bedroll. Stiff joints crack, the distant sound of church bells tolls faintly, and your traveling companions begin to stir. You survived another night on the medieval road, but don't get too comfortable. Today's lesson? Food and water, the real currency of survival. Your stomach reminds you with a low, impatient growl that medieval meals aren't exactly frequent or fancy. And if you're traveling, hunting, or hiding out, every crumb and drop counts. You glance at what's left from last night: a crust of hard bread, a sliver of smoked meat, and a water skin that feels alarmingly light. Welcome to the ongoing challenge of staying alive when medieval infrastructure means no supermarkets, no vending machines, and definitely no iced coffee. First, let's tackle water. It's more complicated than find a stream, drink your fill. Back then, water sources were sketchy at best. Streams could be fouled by livestock, waste, or worse. Wells were prized but often controlled by lords or towns. Historians still argue whether rural folks truly understood water contamination, but let's just say cholera wasn't exactly a mystery illness to them. it just didn't have a name yet. A fringe survival tidbit: in some places, people trusted beer or ale over plain water, even weak, small beer, because the brewing process killed off nasties. You might chuckle at drinking beer for breakfast, but honestly, it was probably safer than that shady pond water you passed earlier. Your water skin nearly empty, you keep an eye out for safer options. A trickling spring up ahead glimmers clear and cold from the hillside. Springs, especially those near rocky outcrops, were often considered cleaner, and sometimes even sacred. You approach cautiously, cup your hands, and the water tastes sweet, mineral-rich, probably your best option all day. Now, food. Forget modern snacking habits. Medieval travelers learned to think like foragers and opportunists. As you trek through the woods beside the road, your eyes scan automatically for edible plants. Nettles, wild garlic, berries, they're out here if you know what to look for. Thankfully, you remember a survival hack passed down among wanderers: the 4-point plant test. Rub it on your skin, wait. A tiny taste on your tongue, wait. Chew, spit, wait. It's slow, but unless you fancy hallucinating into the next life, caution pays. Near a patch of brambles, you spot blackberries, ripe, plump, and mercifully familiar. A few mouthfuls of tart sweetness lift your spirits. It's not a feast, but it keeps you going. You recall hearing that some medieval folk believed eating wild garlic kept both disease and evil spirits at bay. The science? Questionable. The breath? Absolutely devastating. As you move, your group chats about hunting. Traps, snares, and the rare lucky shot with a bow provided meat, but poaching was dangerous. Most game belonged to the local lord by law, and getting caught could cost you a hand, or your life. A fellow traveler, grizzled and sharp-eyed, shows you a simple rabbit snare made from twisted cord and bent saplings. Effective, portable, and, if you set it well hidden, plausibly deniable if the reeve comes sniffing around. Historians still debate how strictly anti-poaching laws were enforced. Some lords turned a blind eye, especially in harsh winters. Others? Let's just say the gallows didn't stay empty for long. Midday finds your group stopping near a hedgerow. Flat stones are cleared, a small fire sparked. Smoked fish, bread, and a few foraged greens become lunch. You chew slowly, savoring the calories. Every meal out here feels hard-won. A fringe tidbit drifts into memory: medieval travelers sometimes carried pemmican-like rations, dense mixtures of dried meat, fat, and fruit. Not pretty, but packed with energy. Hard to come by unless you prepped ahead, though. You've also heard of hardtack, rock-hard biscuits that could survive months on the road, assuming you could gnaw through them without breaking teeth. Travelers soak them in broth or beer to make them edible. It's less a gourmet snack, more an act of dental warfare. The conversation turns to hunger-driven folklore. Tales of famine years when people chewed bark or boiled shoe leather to stay alive. Some exaggerated? Sure. But in a bad season, even those options looked tempting. With bellies marginally fuller, you break camp. The path weaves through farmland, fields dotted with sheep and cattle. Domesticated animals mean milk, meat, hides, but they also mean fences, ownership, and watching eyes. You pass a lone herdsman, crook in hand, eyeing your group warily. Travelers taking sheep? punishable by death. But bartering for cheese or dried meat? Possible, if you have anything to trade. A young woman in your group offers a carved wooden comb to the herdsman's wife, and soon, you're sharing crumbly cheese and rough oatcakes. A small but crucial victory in the survival game. Another trick floats through your thoughts, keeping food hidden. Bandits, hungry locals, even desperate fellow travelers can turn on you if they know you've got supplies. You stash your remaining bread in a cloth pouch sewn inside your cloak, a crude, but effective, medieval pantry on the go. Evening approaches, the group growing quiet as fatigue sets in. You scout for edible roots near a wooded edge. Burdock, dandelion, even wild onions, humble, but filling when stewed. Historians still argue how widespread foraging knowledge truly was among commoners. Some say it was essential, passed down through generations. Others suggest many rural folk barely knew more than their immediate fields and gardens. Either way, out here, you've learned it's better to be cautious and curious than starving. The final light of day gilds the treetops as you set up camp. You boil a pot of water, a slow, smoky process, but one that might save you a nasty illness. Bread softens in the warm broth, greens wilt down to a meager but welcome stew. As the group settles by the fire, bellies not full, but not gnawing empty, you feel it, the steady, quiet rhythm of medieval survival. It's not heroic. It's not grand. It's scraping by, one mouthful, one clean drink at a time. Tomorrow brings new roads, new risks. But for tonight, you have food in your belly, water by your side, and the knowledge that in this brutal old world, those small comforts can mean everything. The fire crackles low as dawn creeps across the treetops, casting long, chilly shadows over your little camp. You wake stiff, sore, and, frankly, smelling like a goat that lost a fight with a haystack. But congratulations, you're still breathing, and that means it's time to learn another essential medieval survival trick: shelter. Because let's be honest, in this world, the weather isn't your friend, the landlords aren't your friends, and unless you've got coin or status, for solid walls and a roof are about as rare as an honest tax collector. You rise, brushing leaves and crumbs from your cloak, eyes scanning the horizon. Storm clouds huddle in the distance, fat and heavy with rain. You've seen what happens to the unprepared traveler caught in a downpour out here: clothes soaked, firewood useless, body temperature plummeting. Hypothermia didn't need a fancy Latin name to kill peasants quietly in the night. First hack. Know your natural shelters. That copse of trees over there? It might block wind, but dense branches can trap moisture, turning your bedding into a soggy mess. Look for slight rises in the land, sheltered rock outcrops, or, if you're lucky, a half-collapsed building from some forgotten war. You and your group pack up, feet squelching through damp earth as the wind picks up. By mid-morning, fat droplets spatter the path, and you spot salvation: a derelict shepherd's hut, slumping under the weight of moss and time. It leans at an angle, the thatch roof patchy, but walls, actual walls, stand defiantly. Inside, it smells of mildew and old wood smoke, but it's dry. You kick away a pile of brittle leaves and stake your claim in a corner. Not glamorous, but when the rain starts in earnest, tapping against the thatch like impatient fingers, you're grateful. Historians still argue how common these abandoned shelters were. Some say the countryside was littered with ruined huts and forgotten cottages after plagues or wars, while others think most were quickly reclaimed or burned for firewood. Either way, you learn fast to recognize shelter for what it is: temporary, flawed, but life-saving. A fringe tidbit: some superstitious travelers avoided abandoned buildings entirely, whispering of spirits, witches, or the lingering sickness of their previous occupants. But you? You're more afraid of freezing to death than a cranky ghost. As the rain hammers down, your companions share other shelter hacks. One teaches you to weave quick windbreaks from branches and brambles, angling them to funnel smoke away from your fire. Another shows how to pile moss and leaves under your cloak to insulate against the cold ground, a trick as old as humanity, but often forgotten until your bones ache with the chill. The conversation turns to man-made shelter, the inns, taverns, and waystations sprinkled along major roads. They exist, sure, but don't romanticize them. Most are expensive, flea-ridden, and operated by innkeepers with sharp eyes and sharper knives tucked beneath the counter. You recall a saying: the fire's warmth costs less than the bed. Meaning, for the price of a drink or a bowl of stew, you can loiter near the hearth, but sleeping indoors? That's another matter. The rain lets up by late afternoon, and you press on, soggy but wiser. Evening falls, and tonight, there's no hut, no welcoming tavern sign creaking in the wind, just open country and your wits. You spot a promising rise in the land, partially shielded by a rocky outcrop. A quick scan confirms the essentials: elevated, no flood risk, sheltered, less wind, good visibility, spot danger early. You and your companion set to work. First, the fire: small, low, easy to smother. Too much light, and you're a beacon for unsavory types. Next, the bedding. You layer dry grass and ferns, careful to clear sharp stones, because nothing ruins a medieval nap like a rock in the ribs. A fringe survival tidbit surfaces: some travelers carried oilcloths or waxed fabric to drape over themselves or their packs. Primitive raincoats, essentially, and lifesavers in foul weather. You envy those lucky enough to own one. Historians still argue whether commoners frequently slept rough or if most managed to beg, barter, or sneak a roof over their heads most nights. Reality probably varied by season, coin purse, and sheer stubbornness. As night deepens, so do the dangers. Without walls, you rely on vigilance and small tricks. You set trip lines, simple cords strung between rocks, tied with noisy objects like shells or pebbles. Not foolproof, but they might buy you precious seconds if someone, or something, creeps into camp. The group shares a nervous joke about wolves, though truth be told, they're rare near populated areas. More likely threats: desperate men, or those who've decided murder is easier than labor. Despite precautions, sleep is light, fitful. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves yanks you halfway awake. But you've learned, shelter is a state of mind as much as a structure. Awareness, preparation, and low expectations, that's your medieval house insurance. The next morning dawns clear, birdsong mingling with sore muscles and gritty eyes. You survived the night again. It's not glamorous, but in this brutal world, it's enough. You shoulder your pack, glance back at your makeshift camp, and step onto the road. In this world, shelter isn't four walls and a key, it's a constant hustle. It's spotting a safe nook before the sun drops. It's knowing when to brave the inn and when to trust the woods. It's understanding that sometimes, your only roof is the sky, and if you play your cards right, it won't be the last sky you see. The morning air carries a brittle chill as you march down the rutted track, cloak pulled tight around your shoulders. The sky is an endless pale sheet, clouds heavy with unspoken threats of rain or worse. But the real danger today isn't weather, it's other people. Welcome to the delicate art of avoiding bandits, bullies, and the occasional warlord. See, while hunger and sickness might whittle you down slowly, a sharp blade in the wrong hands can undo all your careful medieval survival hacks in a heartbeat. Your companions tread silently beside you, eyes sharp, hands never straying far from belts and pouches. It's an unspoken rule, on the road, trust is rationed more strictly than food. First trick? Blend in. You don't want to look rich, weak, or interesting. Flashy jewelry, fancy fabrics? Bad idea. But looking too ragged? That marks you as desperate and easy prey. The sweet spot? Plain, travel-worn, but competent. Someone who looks like they might have a hidden knife, and know how to use it. Historians still argue how organized medieval banditry really was. Some claim vast outlaw networks, Robin Hood-style legends stalking the woods. Others suggest it was more opportunistic, a handful of desperate souls ambushing lone travelers, not criminal empires with recruitment offices. Either way, you keep your head down as a group of armed men approaches, a mix of soldiers and mercenaries, their mismatched armor clanking, swords hanging loose at their hips. No banners. Bad sign. Your heart thuds, but you remember the next survival hack: stay small, stay forgettable. Eyes down, hands visible, no sudden movements. You offer a respectful nod, step aside on the narrow path. They glance your way, assessing, calculating, and keep walking. You exhale slowly. That could have ended badly. A fringe tidbit surfaces as you walk on. Some medieval travelers carried safe conduct letters, written proof from a lord, merchant guild, or church official granting them permission to pass through certain territories. Not foolproof, but sometimes enough to deter trouble. You've got no such parchment, just your wits and luck. The road bends, leading into denser woodland, a perfect ambush spot. You and your group slow, eyes scanning for movement, ears tuned to every snapped twig. The leader of your group mutters about highwaymen's hollows, infamous stretches of road where travelers vanish, never seen again. You slip your hand to your belt where a small dagger rests, not much, but better than nothing. And better yet, you recall the old trick: walk wide when possible, giving yourself space to react. Hugging the tree lean or a ditch can turn you into easy pickings. Ahead, a narrow stone bridge crosses a sluggish stream. A lone figure leans against the far side, posture relaxed but eyes sharp. Your group pauses, weighing options. Sometimes, one lookout means others hidden nearby. Here's where reputation matters. Your group carries the battered, weathered look of seasoned travelers, not rich, not lost, not easy marks. You keep walking, pace steady, expression unreadable. The figure watches, eyes narrowing, but lets you pass. Another small victory. Historians still debate how often common folk traveled far from home. Some say most never strayed more than a few miles their whole lives. Others argue trade, war, and pilgrimage made travel surprisingly common, if risky. You've learned firsthand, The road is a gamble, and knowing how to read people is as important as reading the map, assuming you have one, which you don't. Night creeps in, shadows pooling along the path. Time for the next survival hack. Choose your camp wisely, especially near roads. Too close, and you risk curious passers-by, or worse, deliberate trouble. Too far, and you lose the safety of proximity to towns or patrols. Your group veers off the road, cutting through underbrush until a small hollow reveals itself, natural cover, low fire visibility, one exit point to guard. You settle in, setting your usual trip lines, dousing the fire early. A fringe tidbit makes the rounds as you chew your bland supper. Some travelers swore by wearing bells or clinking trinkets at night to ward off both thieves and spirits. You're skeptical. It seems more likely to attract bandits than scare them, but superstitions die hard. Later, wrapped in your cloak, you reflect on the day's lesson. Danger doesn't always wear armor or carry a sword. Sometimes it smiles from under a merchant's hood. Sometimes it waits behind an inn's doorframe, listening for coin purses to jingle. Sometimes it's just hunger and desperation, sharp enough to turn an honest farmer into a highwayman. Historians still argue whether medieval law enforcement was effective beyond city walls. Sure, the local lord's men might patrol occasionally, but justice? Slow, biased, and often brutal. Out here, it's survival by obscurity. As you drift toward sleep, one last trick anchors your thoughts: the buddy system. Traveling alone? Risky. In a group? Safer. Numbers don't guarantee survival, but they improve your odds. And odds, in this world, are everything. The wind sighs through the trees. Somewhere in the dark, an owl hoots. Your hand rests lightly on your dagger hilt as you fade into uneasy sleep, knowing tomorrow brings more roads, more strangers, and the constant, quiet game of not looking like a target. Morning filters through the canopy, dappling your face with pale gold light as you stir from uneasy sleep. The fire's gone to embers, the birds have started their relentless chatter, and your muscles ache like you wrestled a mule all night. But you're alive. Time to move. Because in medieval times, another constant worry follows you like your own shadow: food. Sure, you've dodged bandits, found shelter, maybe even sweet-talked your way past a suspicious innkeeper. But your stomach doesn't care about those victories. It grumbles, growls, and eventually makes you weak, stupid, and slow if you don't feed it. The first survival hack for food? Lower your standards. Way down. You might dream of juicy venison or warm bread, but out here, meals are often, let's call them, creative. You rummage through your pack, pulling out a small cloth bundle. Inside? Dried peas, hard cheese that's older than your patience, and maybe, if you're lucky, a crust of bread that could double as a blunt weapon. Not exactly gourmet, but it'll keep you standing. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were truly on the edge of starvation constantly or if, in good seasons, they managed a relatively steady diet. What's certain? Traveling often meant scraping by, especially away from towns. A fringe tidbit your grizzled companion shares as you chew: some folks carried journey cakes, dense, tough flatbreads designed to last weeks. Less bread, more edible brick. You try to nibble one later and nearly break a tooth. But when rations run low, as they often do, it's time to forage. So today, your group veers off the track, eyes sharp for the hidden banquet nature sometimes offers. The key? Knowing what's edible, and what'll make you spend the night regretting every life choice. You push through the underbrush, spotting familiar friends, wild garlic, nettles, handle carefully, unless you enjoy itchy hands, and the holy grail, berries. You remember the rule, red can be dead, blue might be true. But even that's risky. Experienced foragers know specifics, not nursery rhymes. A veteran in your group points out sloes, small, dark berries with a sharp, sour bite. Not pleasant raw, but boil them into a tea or mash them into a paste, and suddenly, you've got vitamins and calories in your corner. You also stumble upon mushrooms, clustered beneath a fallen log. The group tenses. Mushrooms are the medieval lottery. Pick the right ones, hearty stew. Pick the wrong? Well, your insides melt while the village priest debates whether it's worth burying you or just warning others. Historians still debate how widespread mycological knowledge was among common folk. Some say peasants mastered their local edible fungi. Others argue that fear of poisoning meant mushrooms were mostly avoided unless starvation forced your hand. Your guide, thankfully, knows the safe kinds. You pocket a few under their watchful eye, vowing to never freelance mushroom hunting solo. Another survival tidbit? Fishing. The streams nearby glimmer with promise. You improvise a line from spare thread and a bent pin. Hours pass, patience thin as your waistline, but eventually, success, a small, silver fish flapping in the grass. Barely a snack, but you savor the victory. Evenings around the fire become cooking lessons. You roast the fish over low flames, stew greens and herbs into a passable broth, and gnaw hard cheese like it owes you money. Not exactly the king's feast, but compared to going hungry, 5-star. There's also the matter of hunting, though that's trickier. First, you need skill. Second, tools beyond your small knife. Third, you need to avoid poaching. Because in medieval times, hunting rights were tangled in legal knots, with harsh penalties for commoners caught taking game from noble lands. Historians still argue how strictly these laws were enforced. Some claim the forests rang with the quiet whistles of peasant snares and secret hunts. Others insist the risk of losing a hand, or your head, kept most folks honest, or at least careful. One of your companions whispers of the classic peasant hack, bird snares. A few cords, some grain or crumbs as bait, and patience. You try it near dusk, and by morning, a startled pigeon flaps helplessly in the loop. Not glamorous, but roast it with wild garlic, and suddenly, your belly forgives you. A fringed tidbit surfaces as you pluck feathers. Some folk believed eating certain animals, like hare or owl, passed on traits like speed or wisdom. You're skeptical, but given your current IQ is starving peasant, a little owl brain doesn't sound terrible. There's also the occasional charitable meal, though you learn fast that begging in towns is a delicate game. Sometimes, a monastery might offer bread to the pious, or pitiful. Other times, locals chase you off with curses and dogs. Medieval hospitality? Hit or miss. Your group debates pooling coins for an inn meal. The vote is split. Inns offer warmth and stew, but also risk, thieves, inflated prices, or simply bad stew that leaves you sprinting for the nearest bush all night. You pass this time. Instead, the night finds you roasting your foraged bounty, wrapped in a smoky cloak of fatigue. You've learned, medieval eating isn't about feasting. It's about constant effort, scanning hedgerows, watching streams, weighing risk and reward with every root and berry. The wind carries the scent of distant hearth fires from unseen villages. Your stomach rumbles, but your pride holds steady. You've fed yourself today, no small feat in this world of empty cupboards and guarded larders. Sleep claims you, hunger momentarily sated, mind already scheming tomorrow's meal plan. Because out here, survival is a three-part equation: stay dry, stay armed, stay fed. And right now, 2 out of 3 isn't so bad. The sun barely peeks over the distant hills as you stir from sleep, and your body reminds you with every creaking joint, medieval life isn't gentle. But aches and hunger aside, today your group faces a different kind of survival challenge, the kind you can't tackle with a dagger or dried peas. Medicine. Because let's face it, in this world, a stubbed toe can turn into a limp, a scratch can fester, and if you're really unlucky, a fever can sweep through your camp like wildfire. The first survival hack? Prevention. You wash your hands in the cold stream, scrubbing away dirt with gritty sand and soapwort, nature's medieval soap. It stings, but infection stings worse. Most folks back then didn't know about germs the way we do, but they understood that filth bred sickness, even if they blamed it on bad air or angry spirits. Historians still argue how advanced medieval medical knowledge really was. Some point to detailed herbals, surgical tools, and university-trained physicians as proof of genuine understanding. Others highlight leeches, bloodletting, and treatments based more on superstition than science. Speaking of superstition, your travel companion, a wiry woman with too many silver charms jangling from her belt, offers you a sprig of St. John's wort. Keeps the evil humors away, she insists, winking. You're not sure about evil humors, but bruises and sore muscles? You'll take any help. Later, the group pauses as one of your companions stumbles, cursing. A twisted ankle, swollen and angry. You help them to a fallen log, remembering the old treatment, elevation and cold water. Simple, but in this world, simplicity often works. A fringe tidbit floats through your memory. Some medieval healers believed that certain herbs only worked if picked at sunrise or under specific moon phases. The logic's questionable, but given how unpredictable survival is, you don't knock tradition. The group debates seeking a wise woman or healer in the next village. Officially, they aren't doctors, but in reality, their herb knowledge often saved more lives than the fancy educated physicians in the cities. Problem is, depending on the region, that same woman might be respected, or accused of witchcraft. Historians still debate how much control the church had over folk medicine. Some records suggest priests tolerated healers as long as they avoided overt pagan rituals. Others hint at periodic crackdowns, where harmless herbalists found themselves shackled beside supposed witches. Your twisted ankle companion winces, and you help splint the injury with a sturdy stick and strips of cloth from a worn tunic. No fancy remedies, but it'll hold. As you walk, the conversation turns to plague stories. Even now, decades after the Black Death's worst waves, its shadow lingers. The mere mention makes everyone's eyes dart nervously. You've heard the signs: swollen lumps, fever, the quick spiral from healthy to buried. You pass a weathered roadside shrine, wooden cross, flowers, and a crude carving of Saint Sebastian, arrows sticking from his chest. He's the unofficial plague saint, because in desperate times, folks cling to whatever comfort they can. A survival hack etched into your brain: avoid the sick. It sounds heartless, but compassion often loses to self-preservation. If a village flies a tattered yellow flag or bars its gates, you steer clear. But sickness isn't always so dramatic. Toothaches, for example, can wreck you just as effectively over time. You've seen the results: swollen jaws, rotting gums, the slow decline as eating becomes agony. No dentists here, just pliers, strong drink, and prayer. A fringe tidbit from a fireside tale: some folks believed placing a frog in your mouth cured toothaches. You file that away under desperate last resorts. The group stops to gather yarrow and comfrey, herbs known for treating wounds. You've seen comfrey mashed into a poultice to help set broken bones, bone knit, they call it. You can't help but marvel that, even without microscopes or lab coats, people figured out what helped and what hurt. Yet, your journey reminds you constantly: medicine's limits show fast out here. Fever without herbs? Pray. Infection without clean water? Pray harder. And if the wrong wound festers, well, that prayer turns into funeral arrangements. One of your group bears scars, ugly, ropey reminders of past injuries barely survived. You ask how they managed it. Luck, they grunt, then after a pause, and a healer who knew her herbs better than most priests know scripture. Historians still argue whether medieval battlefield medicine was shockingly advanced or hopelessly brutal. Some accounts describe intricate arrow extractions and primitive anesthetics. Others paint a bleaker picture: wounds stuffed with moss, cauterized with hot irons, and left to fate. Your own small kit includes basics: clean cloth, salt for disinfecting, a bit of honey, nature's antiseptic. Honey's worth its weight in silver for fighting infection, assuming you can spare it for wounds instead of hoarding it for sweetening your porridge. Even minor survival hacks matter: keeping your knife clean, boiling water when possible, avoiding stagnant ponds where sickness brews unseen. Night creeps in, and around the fire, stories shift from war wounds to miraculous cures. Someone swears they saw a man recover from plague by drinking ale infused with silver shavings. Another claims touching holy relics cured a child's blindness. You listen, skeptical but silent. In a world with limited answers, belief fills the gaps. Your muscles ache, your ankle twinges, your stomach still half empty, but you're not bleeding, feverish, or delirious. That counts as good health, medieval style. As you drift off to sleep, you think of home remedies, healers' huts, and whispered prayers to unseen saints. Medicine out here? It's part science, part superstition, and mostly stubborn will to survive. Tomorrow might bring injury, illness, or some new herb hidden among the weeds. You'll face it like everything else, cautiously, hungrily, and with one eye always on the nearest healer's door. The morning fog clings to the ground like a ghostly blanket as you and your companions break camp, the embers of last night's fire barely warm to the touch. You stretch your aching limbs and check your worn boots, because today's survival lesson isn't about food or wounds, it's about staying hidden. See, in medieval times, danger wasn't just wolves or bad weather. Sometimes, the smartest thing you could do was make yourself, and your entire camp, disappear. Your group's already learned the hard way that out here, visibility equals vulnerability. Bandits, bounty hunters, rival factions, they all scan the roads for easy targets. And a bunch of weary travelers cooking over an open fire? That's as obvious as waving a flag that says, "Rob me." The first survival hack? Camouflage your camp. You move off the main road, deeper into the trees, finding a clearing shielded by low-hanging branches and thick brush. It's damp, but hidden. You learn to pitch your shelter beneath natural cover, using branches and grass to break up the shape of tents and lean-tos. A quirky tidbit you hear from an older traveler? Some medieval scouts rubbed mud and crushed leaves on their cloaks to better blend into the forest. Primitive, sure, but surprisingly effective when you want to vanish into the green. As you settle in, the group extinguishes the fire properly, scattering ashes and covering any trace of smoke. You've heard the cautionary tales. Glowing embers seen from afar have led entire camps to ruin. Historians still argue how common stealth camping really was among peasants. Some say most travelers stuck to towns and roads, relying on numbers and luck. Others insist that those with experience, mercenaries, merchants, even pilgrims, mastered the art of vanishing into the landscape, especially when carrying something valuable. Tonight, your group takes it seriously. No loud songs, no bright lanterns, and even your cooking fire is reduced to a small, smoky trickle barely hot enough to heat broth. It isn't comfortable, but survival rarely is. Of course, stealth isn't just for camping. As you travel, you learn to read the land. You avoid ridgelines where silhouettes stand out against the sky. You skirt open fields, sticking close to hedgerows and tree leans. Your eyes constantly scan for unnatural shapes, shimmering metal, distant campfire glows, the sharp lines of tents or carts. One of your companions, a wiry man with missing teeth but sharp instincts, teaches you another fringe hack: sound discipline. Modern militaries didn't invent it. Even in the 1300s, experienced folks knew to muffle clanking gear, wrap tools in cloth, and keep voices low. You practice walking with careful steps, avoiding snapping twigs or crunching leaves. It feels absurd at first, but when a group of armed riders thunders down the distant road without spotting you, it suddenly makes sense. Your group debates using false trails, deliberately leaving tracks leading away from camp. It's a clever trick, though risky if the wrong people follow them. You opt for caution, brushing out your footprints with leafy branches as you move. Another survival tidbit floats your way. Some medieval travelers used decoy fires at a safe distance to mislead attackers. Risky? Sure. But if it meant your real camp stayed hidden, some thought it was worth the gamble. As dusk falls, you spot smoke spiraling from the distant hills, a clear sign of a campfire, bold and unhidden. Your companions exchange wary glances. Could be friendly traders, or bandits, confident enough to flaunt their presence. You decide to give it wide berth. Night deepens, and with it comes another stealth concern: light discipline. Your small fire is shielded with rocks and branches, barely visible beyond a few feet. It's enough for warmth, barely, but not enough to give you away. You even angle reflective surfaces, like cooking pots or metal buckles, so moonlight won't glint off them. Historians still argue how aware common folk were of these stealth tactics. Some claim only soldiers and outlaws mastered them. Others believe that centuries of living with constant threats made even peasants naturally cautious. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in the middle. The next day brings new challenges. You're approaching a border region, where local loyalties blur and patrols from rival lords prowl the roads. Here, your ability to blend in, or disappear entirely, could mean life or death. Your companion shares a sneaky trick for passing through villages unnoticed: dress down. You smear mud on your cloak, dull your boots, and keep your head low. Look like a miserable peasant, and most won't give you a second glance. A fringe tidbit from the road: some merchants carried forged travel documents, fake seals from distant nobles to deter harassment. You don't have that luxury, but you do your best to look harmless. Despite your caution, there are close calls. A mounted patrol clatters by as you crouch hidden beneath a thicket, heart pounding in your ears. They shout in an unfamiliar accent, scanning the roadside. You stay still as stone, barely breathing until their hoofbeats fade. Even in towns, stealth doesn't end. You learn to navigate side streets, avoid drunken tavern brawls, and listen more than you speak. Loose tongues have led many travelers to the wrong end of a sword, or worse. By the time you find a safe place to rest, your nerves buzz with quiet tension, but you've avoided confrontation. Another small victory in the long game of medieval survival. Around the fire, you share stories, some true, some exaggerated, of disappearing into the wilderness, dodging patrols, and blending into towns. It isn't glamorous, but in this harsh world, invisibility is as valuable as armor. Sleep claims you lightly, ears tuned to every crack of twig and whisper of wind. Out here, it's not always the strongest who survive. Sometimes, it's the ones no one sees. The first pale fingers of dawn creep across the sky as you stir from your uneasy sleep, the forest around you whispering with the sounds of waking birds and rustling leaves. Your muscles ache, your joints pop, and your brain reminds you, you've been roughing it in the medieval wild for days now, and you're still standing. But as you sit up, stretch, and reach for your boots, a creeping realization sets in. Survival out here isn't just about finding food, hiding from danger, or avoiding illness. It's about endurance. Long term, day after day, week after week, surviving the grind, the cold, the hunger, the uncertainty. Most folks picture medieval life as knights and castles. You know the truth: survival is a slog. Your first endurance hack of the day: mental grit. Sure, you can patch a blister and scavenge wild berries, but staying sane through the monotony and fear? That's the real test. It starts with routine. You pack your gear in the same careful order each morning: bedroll, cooking pot, worn knife, herb pouch. It's not much, but the predictability soothes your nerves. One foot in front of the other, day after day. Historians still argue how much of the medieval peasant experience was structured versus chaotic. Some say daily life followed rigid patterns of work, worship, and sleep. Others point to the constant upheaval, war, famine, disease, as proof that unpredictability was the only certainty. You reckon both are true, depending on the season, and your luck. The second endurance hack: pacing. The eager traveler rushes to cover ground, but seasoned survivors know to conserve energy. You settle into a steady rhythm: walk an hour, rest briefly. Adjust your pack to ease pressure on sore shoulders. Sip water regularly, even if you don't feel thirsty. A fringe tidbit you hear from a grizzled old merchant: some pilgrims tied a small pebble inside their shoe. Annoying? Definitely. But it forced them to walk carefully, avoiding twisted ankles and sprains. You try it once. Spoiler, it works, but you last about an hour before tossing the pebble into the woods. Physical endurance isn't just about walking, though. Your body faces hunger, cold, heat, and fatigue in endless rotation. Meals are small and infrequent, some dried beans here, a handful of foraged nuts there. You chew slowly, making every crumb count. At night, the cold creeps in like an unwelcome guest. You huddle close to the embers, wrapping your thin cloak tighter. No roaring campfires here, not unless you want to broadcast your position to every opportunist within miles. A fringe trick your companion shares? Heated stones. You bury them in the coals, then tuck them near your bedding. The warmth fades eventually, but it's enough to soften the night's chill, assuming you don't accidentally burn a hole through your blanket first. Fatigue grinds on you worse than hunger. You start to forget what day it is. Your dreams blur with reality, faces from home, flickering torches in the dark, the endless sound of boots crunching gravel. That's when you learn the next survival hack: micro rests. 5 stolen minutes leaning against a tree. A quick nap while your companions watch for danger. You'd be amazed how much energy a few moments with your eyes closed can restore. Historians still argue whether medieval folk were chronically sleep-deprived or simply adapted to irregular rest. Some records suggest segmented sleep patterns, people waking for an hour in the middle of the night before drifting off again. Others claim hard labor left most too exhausted to wake for anything. You believe it. Out here, sleep is currency, and you guard it carefully. Long-term survival wears at more than your body. It chips away at your spirit. You miss warm bread, familiar voices, the safety of walls. But your group keeps spirits up with quiet songs, whispered jokes, and tales of the road ahead, real or imagined. A quirky superstition your companion mutters as you pass a forked tree, touch the bark and spit over your left shoulder. Keeps your luck whole. You oblige. Why not? Out here, belief is as good as armor some days. Endurance also means knowing when to slow down, even stop. Pushing through illness, injury, or sheer exhaustion is a surefire path to disaster. You see it when a fellow traveler collapses, feverish and trembling. The group halts for 2 full days, hidden deep in the woods, nursing them back to health with herbs and patience. It's frustrating, dangerous even, but necessary. You can't outrun exhaustion. As days stretch into weeks, small victories mark your progress. You patch worn boots with scavenged leather. You learn which mushrooms won't kill you. You master the art of securing water without alerting every creature nearby. It's not glamorous, but each hack stacks up, brick by brick, into your survival fortress. The final endurance lesson sneaks up on you: mindset shift. Survival stops feeling like a temporary emergency and settles into a way of life. You stop counting days and start counting moments: the warmth of the sun on your back, the sweet burst of wild berries, the shared laugh after narrowly avoiding a patrol. Historians still argue whether most medieval travelers adapted to this life willingly or resented every mud-soaked, hunger-filled step. Some letters and diaries suggest both, the pride of hardiness tangled with bone-deep weariness. You feel both, too. But with every sunrise survived, your confidence grows. Not cocky, but steady. You might not thrive in this brutal world yet, but you endure. And out here? That counts for everything. The path ahead winds deeper into unknown territory, and the weight of uncertainty presses on you like a second pack. But you've lasted this long, and with steady steps, quiet grit, and a pocket full of odd survival hacks, you'll last a little longer. Because survival isn't about conquering the wild. It's about outlasting it. The wind shifts as you crest a low hill, and the world spreads out before you, rolling fields, dense forests, a glimmer of smoke curling from distant rooftops. Civilization, at last. But before you get too hopeful, you remind yourself, just because there are people doesn't mean there's safety. In fact, your final set of survival hacks deals with the most unpredictable part of medieval life, other humans. After weeks in the wild, dodging bandits and enduring the grind, you might think entering a village or market town brings relief. And sure, there's food, warmth, even music drifting from tavern doors. But human settlements also mean laws, taxes, suspicion, and a whole new set of dangers. The first thing you notice as you approach the settlement? The guards. Maybe not in shining plate armor, this isn't a royal court, but sturdy men with cudgels, spears, and sharp eyes. You adjust your cloak, keeping your hands visible, your expression blank. Your first human hack. Blending in. Look like you belong, and fewer questions get asked. Historians still argue whether medieval townsfolk were welcoming or hostile to outsiders. Some records show travelers finding work and lodging easily. Others tell of beatings and theft for those who seemed foreign or suspicious. Today, you play it safe. You mimic the local speech, avoid eye contact with armed men, and keep your coin pouch hidden. The marketplace buzzes with life, traders hawking wares, children darting between carts, chickens clucking indignantly underfoot. It feels normal. But beneath the bustle lurks a constant tension. You clock the pickpockets lingering near the fruit stalls, the bored soldiers eyeing strangers, the rough-looking men nursing Alesh at the tavern's edge. A quirky tidbit floats your way as you buy stale bread. Some travelers carried a fake protection charm, an amulet or token claimed to ward off disease or thieves. Superstition? Definitely. But sometimes, a bit of theater makes you less of a target. You tuck one into your belt, a carved wooden token, meaningless but oddly comforting. Your next human hack? Know the hierarchy. Out here, peasants, craftsmen, merchants, clergy, they all operate in delicate balance. Step on the wrong toes, insult the wrong official, and your survival streak ends fast. You mind your words, especially with anyone wearing fine clothes or bearing religious symbols. The local priest eyes you as you pass but says nothing. Maybe luck's on your side today. But not everyone's as fortunate. You hear the whispers, of a traveler beaten for refusing to pay a toll, of a merchant's cart confiscated over unpaid guild dues. The law in these parts is flexible. Favoritism, bribes, intimidation, it's all part of the game. Historians still argue how widespread corruption was. Some insist medieval justice was harsh but fair, especially in well-run towns. Others describe it as a mess of petty lords, greedy officials, and arbitrary rules. As an outsider, you assume the worst. And plan accordingly. You trade cautiously, avoiding flashy deals. You sleep in a crowded common room, not a private stall, where there's safety in numbers. And when you hear rumors of a disappearance near the outskirts, you file it under reasons to leave soon. The final human survival hack? Listening more than talking. You keep your ears open at the tavern. The drunk farmer boasts about road conditions. The merchant mutters of price hikes on salt and grain. The guard complains of raiders in the east. Each snippet is a breadcrumb, a clue to what dangers and opportunities lie ahead. A fringed tidbit you catch: some travelers carried coded maps, symbols etched in seemingly innocent patterns, known only to those in the know. You don't have one, but you memorize local landmarks, just in case. As night falls, your group reconvenes, weighing the risks. Stay too long, and trouble finds you. Leave too soon, and you miss a chance to stock up. You settle on cautious compromise. You resupply: dried meat, coarse wool, even a new flint for your fire kit. Then, before dawn breaks, you slip out along a side path, avoiding the main gates entirely. The road awaits, winding, wild, and merciless. But you're not the same traveler who stumbled into this world weeks ago. You've patched wounds, scavenged meals, hidden from enemies, and navigated the tangled web of human interaction. You've learned that in medieval life, survival isn't a grand victory. It's small wins strung together with stubborn grit and a touch of luck. As you walk beneath the fading stars, a gentle confidence hums beneath your weariness. You've endured. You've adapted. And now? You vanish back into the landscape, just another shadow on the road, one more soul outlasting the medieval grind. Because in this brutal, beautiful, unpredictable world, that's the greatest hack of all. The stars fade to soft silver as you press forward, your footsteps quiet, the forest around you easing into the hush of pre-dawn. The worst of the night has passed, the unknown dangers tucked back into their corners, and the steady rhythm of your breathing fills the space between shadows. You've walked the paths of forgotten forests, hidden from prying eyes, weathered hunger, cold, and uncertainty. You've slipped through towns full of wary faces, outsmarted both the wild and the willful, and with every quiet victory, you've proven one simple truth: survival here isn't about strength or bravado. It's about patience. Cleverness. Listening to the world when it whispers its old, stubborn lessons. The birds begin their tentative songs, the first hints of daylight stretching pale fingers across the horizon. The hard edges of the world soften for a moment, the crackling leaves underfoot, the distant rush of water, the gentle wind stirring through the branches above. You settle into your pace, steady now, carrying not just your pack, but everything you've learned. The medieval wild may never welcome you, but it respects those who endure it. So, for now, let your shoulders ease. Let your breath slow. The road ahead will still be there tomorrow. But tonight, you've earned your quiet. Sleep well, traveler.